Our next guest that is up, I am so honored to have Dr. Dean Radin as our guest. Dean is the chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, IONS, and volunteer faculty in the Department of Psychology at Sonoma State University. Before joining the research staff at IONS in 2001, he held appointments at AT&T Bell Labs, Princeton University, University of Edinburgh, and SRI International. He is the author or co-author of over 200 technical and popular articles, a dozen book chapters, and 3 books, including the award-winning The Conscious Universe, Entangled Minds, and the 2014 Silver Nautilus Book Award winner for Supernormal from Random House. His website is www.deanradin.com. Without any further delay, let's get him on the line. Dr. Radin, thank you so much for being here tonight. Welcome to Fringe Radio and K-Talk.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. I have had so many guests, so many listeners that have requested you to be on the show, and got your name and started looking through your work, and I find it absolutely fascinating and interesting, and I'd like to cover a lot of different things. We got a lot of questions sent in, but I guess to start out with, I hope you're having a great weekend. And how did you get into doing everything you do? What got you to this point to talk about this subject?
Well, I guess for much of the same reason why people would listen to your show.
Okay.
And that is everyone's always curious about things that are not yet understood very well. And I was trained as a scientist and was always interested in science and engineering, and I worked in those fields for many years. And within science, there are probably more mysteries than is generally considered. I mean, science is sometimes portrayed as we kind of know everything and almost everything is almost wrapped up. But the reality is that we change our textbooks about every 5 years or less because we keep discovering new things.
Right.
And so just like people are interested in things paranormal and other fringe topics, in science, there are just as many, if not more, mysteries. And the reason why I like doing science is because it provides a very clear way of going about studying these kinds of topics. So that's like a short answer. Though a slightly longer answer would involve, in my childhood, reading lots and lots of science fiction and fairy tales and the equivalent of Harry Potter, although that was years before Harry Potter was written. But it all touches the same thing. It's a notion that there's mystery and things that need to be explored that aren't very well understood yet. And that's what attracted me, and it still attracts me.
You know, Doctor, one thing that I've interviewed a lot of different people, and especially on some of these subjects, we seem to come across. You get the hardcore scientist that strictly, it's black or it's white. The results are positive or they're negative, and they tend to be, I don't want to say not skeptical, but they tend to be closed-minded. They don't want to look outside the box. And then there's people like yourself that that look into these different subjects. You use your knowledge and your understanding of science to understand them more and even think into deeper, more realms and look outwards and be more open-minded. Is that kind of when you talk about some of these topics in the scientific community and your credentials? I mean, where you've worked at Princeton, all the things that you've done. Do you ever sometimes have a little, not I don't want to say an issue, but get questioned a little bit, or do you ever have people say, "Hey, why are you even looking into these type of things?"
Oh yeah. What we're talking about here is largely a matter of the sociology of science, which is not talked about very much, but science is a human activity, and every human activity, like politics, there's always an emotional undercurrent, and there are things that are taboo to talk about, and this is true in science as well. There's some things you just don't talk about, because if you do, you'll either lose your credibility or you'll lose your career. So I always thought that was a pity, because there's so many interesting things out there, and science is really just a method. So it's a way of approaching different kinds of questions. And I also discovered that while I would say the majority of academic scientists are very careful about what they talk about because they have real concerns about keeping their job, but there are also many, many scientists, including in the academic world, who are fascinated with these same issues that we're talking about tonight and the other issues that you talk on your show, but they've learned not to talk about it publicly.
Right.
And so the way that I see this, given that I'm kind of a lightning rod for things having to do with psychic phenomena from a scientific perspective, I get emails probably a couple per week from academics. Sometimes they're retired scientists, but many times they're active professors one place or another around the world who are desperate to talk about their interests for one reason or another, but they always end the email or the phone call with a caution that I shouldn't tell anybody that they're interested in this topic. and that's simply a reflection of the taboo. Right. We all learn very quickly some things you just don't talk about. So I think of it a little bit, it's like Fight Club.
Right.
The rules in Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. Well, the rules about being a scientist and interested in things paranormal is you don't talk about it.
But that's got to be a good positive feeling for you, Dean, because when they give you a call, when your peers call you or colleagues call you, or again, retired researchers, at least they're being open-minded, saying, hey, what if? There could be the what if. This could exist. And that's kind of what starts, that's kind of what puts things in motion.
Right. And so part of what I am becoming more interested in is how to change the social context which sustains this taboo. Right. I've never met any scientists, however skeptical they may be, that if I get a chance to talk to them one-on-one, they become interested. And the reason they become interested in is because everyone, like 100% of everyone out there, is interested in the topic, sometimes positively and sometimes negatively, but almost nobody is neutral. They have an opinion one way or the other. When they get an opportunity, especially the really skeptical ones, they get an opportunity to start grilling another scientist who actually knows something about these topics, they become really interested.
Right.
So my colleagues and I have been trying through a variety of different methods to change the context so that we can have open dialogues about these kinds of topics. And we're having some success. We're slowly be able to publish articles in mainstream scientific journals. And we see immediately that as soon as one of those articles appears in the mainstream, it gets thousands of downloads, tens of thousands of downloads, as compared to a typical paper in an academic journal. If you're really lucky, maybe 100 people would download it, typically more like 50. And we're talking here tens of thousands. And that tells me that my suspicion is correct, that lots of people, including scientists, are very interested in this, but as long as they can anonymously download these articles, they'll do it. They just may not admit to their friends that they are doing that.
Right. They don't go to the UFO meetings after work.
Or if they do, they go with a fake mustache and a bag over their head.
Right, exactly. What got you attracted into? I mean, what got you into the psychic phenomena? What was kind of the trigger point for you? Now, obviously, you talk about trying to meld science with it, but I mean, did something happen to you, or did you just always have an interest in it, or was it one of these subjects that nobody can explain, and you're the guy that's trying to help with the explanation of what it may be?
I don't recall any experiences as a child that I can consider to be psychic, nor ever having a discussion in my family about it. No psychic grandmothers. Have no religious background, so there's nothing from that realm. I think the place where I first learned about it was primarily science fiction, and probably fairy tales too. And so within that domain of literature, it's taken for granted that all kinds of interesting mental phenomena exist. And I simply became curious about it. Mm-hmm. Like, is this purely fantasy, or does this theme keep coming up again and again, and also saturate our entertainment, movies and television? Does it keep happening because there's something real there, or is it just wish fulfillment?
Right.
So it was that question. It's the question, the curiosity of, could this actually be true? Because if it is true, it means a good chunk of what fledgling scientists or student scientists are being taught is completely missed, a whole realm of human experience. And so that just captured me. For a long time, just intellectually. I mean, I read a lot when I was younger, still read a lot. And I was curious about that notion, but what really caught my attention as a teenager was when I found that there was a branch of science that actually has been using scientific methods to study these phenomena, and that some interesting things were found. And so that's where I discovered the whole literature of parapsychology, and I read most of it very quickly. And I was thrilled that there were scientists out there who were challenging the status quo and actually finding interesting things. And that's what really hooked me.
Yeah, because, I mean, when we talk about psychic phenomena, I think a lot of people, the average Joe, the average layman, kind of thinks of, if they believe, they feel that it may be some sort of a, like you said, like a Harry Potter, maybe a mystical type of thing. But to try to attach scientific proof to it, or at least introduce, let's call it scientific controls, or a scientific, at least, put it in a box in some way, shape, or form, however you want to look at it, gives it a little bit more, a little more credibility to it not being mystical, but something that, I don't know if we want to say physically exists, but at least something there exists.
Right. The question is it coincidence, is it fantasy, or is it real?
Right.
And that's what science is very good at answering that question. The more difficult question is, well, once we reach a conclusion that the phenomena are real, some of them are real, then we know two things. One is that when people report a precognition or clairvoyance or whatever, they're not crazy. Now, so that doesn't mean that some people aren't crazy, because some of them are. You can be delusional and think that you're having a psychic effect, but many completely normal people have these effects as well, and then they're reluctant to talk about it because they think it sounds nutty. Well, we know from the science that sometimes there really are genuine precognitions, and there's genuine telepathy, and so on. So that's one thing that's a useful reason for studying these phenomena, that we know they're real. But the more difficult question is, now that we have some confidence that they're real, how in the world do we fit it into the rest of our scientific worldview?
Right.
And so that's, my colleagues and I for many years now, for decades actually, have been really focusing on this issue. What does this tell us about the nature of physical reality? And there's some progress in that direction, but it's a very slow progress.
When we talk about psychic phenomena, especially psychics, I think one thing that's kind of muddied the waters is I think there's a lot of people out there, sad to say, and I've had a lot of psychics on the show, or people that claim to have psychic abilities. I think there's a lot of people out there that are just making a quick buck off of it. I'm not saying that they're all not true, but I think there's a lot of fake people out there. There's a lot of people that. To me, I've read different books on people who have come out and said they had no psychic abilities at all, but they're good listeners. And a lot of people, a lot of just day-to-day Joes that are having a bad time in their life, whether it's divorce or death or financial problems or what have you. Sometimes they can kind of. They could sit down with a psychic and spill the beans right there. These people are very good at interpretation, and they turn it around and just, tell you what you want to hear or maybe what you don't want to hear. But I do believe that there are some people out there that do have, call it a gift, if not maybe a gift, an ability, but trying to discern who is trying to make a quick buck, or the wishful thinking thing, as you said, someone who's trying to maybe fulfill some sort of fantasy. That I think that's got to be a tough one. There is to try to find out what's really real, which may have some real substance to it, versus somebody who is just a pretender or a wannabe.
Well, there's no question that there are con artists who take advantage of people by making believe that they're psychic. And it's true that some of them they're con artists in the sense that they say they're psychic. There are others who might simply say that they're intuitive, and they may be a good counselor as well. So a lot of it depends on why somebody is going to a psychic reader. If they're going for advice, then it's not that different than going to a good counselor. If they're going to get the lottery numbers next week, well, that's quite something different. So fortunately, when we do experiments in the laboratory, you can tell very quickly if somebody actually has a skill or no skill, because we use controlled tests and people can't cheat, and you find out whether somebody's actually faking it or not. So that's not as much of a problem in the laboratory.
What type of tests can you give an individual? Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, what are some of the things that what's if somebody comes to you or if you find somebody or you find the right match and someone says, "Hey, look, I think I have some sort of ability that I believe nobody else has." What type of scientific test can you do to see if there is something really there?
Well, first of all, we almost never take somebody's word for what it is that they can do or test them.
Okay.
And the reason we don't do that is because there's a huge range of different kinds of things that people claim. Some are probably real, and a lot of them are probably not real. But there's a limited number of ways that you can test these phenomena. So if you try to squeeze somebody's claimed special skill into one of the smaller classes of experiments, sometimes you can get a genuine intuitive, somebody's really good with real psychic skills, and they won't do well at all on an experiment because their skill doesn't match the experiment. So what we do generally is we work with people either who don't make any claims at all, just average people, or we might select subgroups like people who do meditation or people who do martial arts, that kind of a population. We know that certain kinds of populations in laboratory tests do better than others. Again, people who are not making any special claims, but they as a group, they reliably do better than others, and that's why we select them. On rare occasions, we'll work with somebody who has a good track record of being really good at a particular kind of psychic skill. And then we, on rare occasions, will create an experiment specifically with that particular skill. So there's probably a dozen or so different types of experiments that have been done many, many times, and those form the corpus of methods that are used. And so when we have somebody do those tests, whether they claim to be psychic or not, we know because of large statistics based on lots of other people, we know how good they really are.
Have you found some amazing people with these tests? Have you found some or come across some that you're like, wow, this is a little mind-blowing what they can do?
Occasionally, yes. Some people will knock your socks off on an experiment. The proof of the pudding is whether they can do it repeatedly,
right?
And that's a little bit more rare. This still tends to be somewhat spontaneous because human performance is highly variable, even among experts. And so one of the ways that I try to explain this is the reason that we watch sports and the reason why we all pay attention to the Olympics is that these are people at the very top of their game around the world, and yet the actual winners are usually not known. And that's because human performance, even at those rarefied levels, is highly variable. And it's exactly the same way in this realm. Somebody could be a genuinely good psychic, have some kind of skill, but maybe they ate a bad burrito that day and, they're just not going to do so well. So this means you need to do many, many repeated tests with individuals in order to gauge whether or not they're good on average. Some people are, though.
Now, in looking through your bio, so you participated in a program investigating psychic phenomena for the U.S. government. Obviously, we've heard of I've heard of this in the past. I know some people, we talk about remote viewing. Some people, there's a lot of people think it's nothing but fantasy, but yet my understanding there's been several government, I don't know if you want to call them experiments or observations of the art of remote viewing is maybe a little more true and a little more real than other people think. With the government, with some of the government tests, obviously that in itself, just with the government coming out and making that kind of statement, or wanting to research this area, I would say is one of two things. One, they just want to, throw, it's kind of like the Roswell thing. Let's throw everybody off, the UFO phenomena, whatever type of phenomena is out there, or there is a real true interest there. So I would assume by them calling you in, somebody believes that this is just not hocus pocus.
Well, there are two reasons why the government, and by the government we're talking about either the Department of Defense
right.
or the intelligence world, the reason why they're interested in these things is twofold. The first is that they may hear of a possible threat from another country. Somebody hears something about the Russians or the Chinese or some other country that has a program in this area. And so what they're looking for is an assessment of whether or not they can believe, or we can believe, whether the threat is real. So that's the whole realm of threat assessment. The other reason that government agencies become interested in this is because, as you can imagine, and when it comes to issues of intelligence primarily, but it's true in the military as well, oftentimes decisions have to be made and there isn't sufficient information. I mean, we all know what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq, especially Iraq. Decisions were made, and we didn't have enough information right. in order to make the right decision. But this happens all the time. And there are many, many circumstances where leaders have to decide without actually knowing the full details. Well, how do you do that? One of the values of genuine clairvoyance or remote viewing, which, by the way, absolutely is true, one of the values of that is that it provides another channel of information. It doesn't provide a perfect channel by any means. No form of intelligence is perfect. But it provides one more piece of information that when you combine it with the rest of the information or the intelligence about a given topic, if everything converges towards a certain answer, well, then you have more confidence to go ahead and actually do some kind of action. And that's more or less what the operational side of the government program was all about, to gain information under conditions where it was either difficult to get information or impossible in some cases. My part in that program, it's now known generally by one of its code names, Stargate, but I was involved in an earlier program with a different code name. My part of it was doing research on figuring out how to make these phenomena more reliable. That's primarily what I was doing. The operational side was in the Army, and they were going out and doing pragmatic things. I was in the lab trying to figure out how do we make this more reliable than it is. Gotcha.
And maybe control it a little bit more.
Well, it goes along with reliability. If you understand what the nature of the phenomena is, then you can control it and make it better.
Gotcha. With psychic phenomena, Dean, does one of the questions that one of our listeners sent in, it says, is the entanglement of minds part of the psychic phenomenon?
Well, that was the topic of my book, Entangled Minds.
Okay.
And the upshot is maybe. I can't say for sure that that's the case, but the reason why quantum entanglement might be associated with things like telepathy, actually with all psychic phenomena, is because before the development of quantum mechanics and relativity, so like a century ago, there wasn't any physical theory that was even close to explaining how these phenomena could be true. And this goes back to what I was saying before about how do we fit these phenomena into the rest of what we know about science. So a century ago, it was complete hand-waving. There was no explanation for these kinds of things. Like precognition was impossible. because time is absolute and space is absolute, so remote viewing is impossible, and so on. But with the rise of relativity theory and later quantum mechanics, it became clear that what your common sense tells you, that space and time are absolutes, well, that's not true. We know it's not true both from a theoretical perspective and from an empirical perspective. Time and space and matter and energy are all relative to each other. It's a much more flexible and fluid way of thinking about physical reality. And in particular, entanglement suggests that at very deep levels of the physical world, everything is connected in strange ways, a holistic way. If that is true, and as far as we can tell it is true because people are already making technologies based on this stuff, that suggests that deep physical reality is not really any different than the reality we all live in. It's just that our normal senses don't reveal it very well. We live in a world which is very deeply connected through space and through time. Given that, it becomes a little bit less strange to think about psychic phenomena because the strange part of psychic phenomena is all about interconnections through space and time. So, and physicist friends who say, no, you're just trying to connect spooky physics with spooky psychic stuff and there's no relationship. And I would say, no, that's actually not the case, because the way that we understand the physical world today, mainly through quantum mechanics, is so close to the same mystery within psychic phenomena that I think it's not a coincidence. It's just too good to be true that we just happen to live in a world of fully interconnected, and that's the nature of these phenomena as well, psychic phenomena. So that's really where the connection comes in.
You know, if I can back up just a little bit, let's step out. Well, I guess psychic phenomena will be there, but let's talk about however we want to define it. Energy, soul, the essence of a person's soul. We've got this physical body. Of course, the heart beats. Our limbs move. We're talking. We're hearing. We're communicating with each other. But there's that spirit, if you will, the soul of the body, that spark of energy that keeps, that makes you and me and all the listeners, everybody unique. And when we start talking about paranormal research, people that and even psychics, some people with some psychics, again, whether they're telling the truth or not, claim they can see people that have passed on. They can see spirits. Do you believe that this energy, the soul of a person, that this possibly may truly exist? We have even at a very low, at a high level, people are out doing paranormal research. They're recording EVPs. They're recording voices. They're getting intellectual voices that they can't physically hear, but yet a digital instrument is able to pick that up. Some energy, something created that. Do you believe that this could all potentially be interconnected?
Well, that is the question that also comes up with survival research. Does consciousness survive the death of the body? And my position is that I'm agnostic. I simply don't know enough, and I don't believe that we have enough evidence one way or the other to make a closed case. Mm-hmm. I think the jury is still out when it comes to these kinds of issues. And one of the reasons I say this, and this goes for virtually every form of evidence for survival, having to do with spirits and mediumship and EVP and all the rest of it, we know a lot at this point about psychic phenomena in living people. And that's what we do in the laboratory. We work with the living. Even if you're working with a medium, the medium is living.
Right.
From over a century ago, 130 years ago, when people started studying mediums, they very quickly realized that the way that you test whether a medium is telling you information which is correct is that they're telling you stuff that somebody living has to verify as being correct. Well, that could immediately be thought of as telepathy. or it could be thought of as clairvoyance. The medium is getting information from somewhere that is later verified. That's one of the reasons why mediumship research kind of went out of favor a century ago, although there is a little bit still going on today. It went out of favor because people realized that we first have to understand telepathy to understand what is the boundary. What can we expect about telepathy in living people? And once we knew that better, then we'd be able to say, well, maybe mediumship is not speaking to departed spirits, but it's telepathy among the living. So this same kind of argument can be placed for any other survival-type phenomena. Seeing spirits, EVP could be the effect of a living person who is somehow doing a mental interaction with the equipment, and so on. I know that I've been on a number of haunting investigations, and some of that, there's a lot of time spent on haunting investigations. Nothing happens at all. Mm-hmm. But occasionally something strange does happen. The problem is that when something strange happens and it's not under a controlled condition, you don't actually know what it was. Right. It's something strange, and it sits that way. That's why I've stopped going on field investigations, because you can't really nail down what happened, and I don't like wasting my time. So this is why I remain agnostic. I think, like a lot of people, I'd kind of prefer that consciousness survived in some way. Right. So I'm certainly not against the idea. Right. It's just that when I weigh all of the evidence, I don't see a strong, I don't see the scales tipping in that direction very strongly at this point. I should add that I have many friends who very strongly believe that there's some kind of life after death, and they sometimes get annoyed with me for not agreeing with them, but that's simply my best judgment at the moment.
Oh no, and hey, I totally I respect that. I mean, I would hope, I would truly hope, Dean, that when we leave this world, however we want to define this world as, I hope there's something after. I hope that it's not like just going to sleep and not dreaming and that's it. I would hope not. I believe that people do get a lot of physical signs, but can they be proved by science? No, not really. I mean, and then there is the wish, like you said earlier, we first started talking, there is the wishful thinking. It's like going to doing a paranormal investigation in a dark, spooky house on an October night with it storming out. The mind can play a lot of tricks as well. Right. In trying to separate that, fact from fantasy is that can be a tough one. It's just like seeing a scary movie. You come home and you're scared out of your wits. The lights are off. Everything you hear, everything that goes bump is going to make you think there's something there. And again, I think that's just your mind playing tricks on you. Right. But I think that what you're doing, it's kind of the litmus test. It's saying let's put some scientific proof to it, and hopefully someday something will come out and the concrete evidence will really be there. It sounds like it's starting to stack up in that direction.
There is more and more evidence as people become more clever on how they do these kinds of experiments. I think at this point, does science have the capacity to answer the question? There, I'm not entirely sure. I think we may not have all of the tools we need in order to test these ideas. For example, many people think that near-death experience is an experience of the afterlife, and yet near-death experience, by definition, is somebody who's not only near death; they're not dead. And then people will argue that, for example, if you have a cardiac arrest, that 30 seconds later you're brain dead. Like you go flatline, no electrical activity in the brain. That used to be a criterion for actual death. The cortex of the brain shows no activity, you're dead. But now we know that the deeper portions of the brain, not the surface of the cortex, but deeper in, actually remains viable for minutes. So if you had a cardiac arrest in 30 seconds, the cortex starts to shut down, but the deep brain actually keeps going for minutes. If you happen to fall into an icy water, then you basically your body goes into hibernation, and the brain still remains active for quite a long time. So it's not as clear as it used to be that something like a near-death experience during cardiac arrest provides evidence for survival. What it does do, however, is when people have the near-death experience and then they report seeing something or experiencing something that they could not have seen from the operatory table, that could be explained as a peculiar form of clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is true from other laboratory experiments, and we also know that virtually all psychic phenomena are much better when you're not in an ordinary state of awareness. And so you can't get much further from an ordinary state of awareness when your body is shutting down. And so I kind of, my way of thinking of this now is that near-death experiences are a very altered state of awareness, and in that state, the whole range of psychic phenomena are going to be a lot stronger, and that's what people are reporting. And see, what I just said is psychic stuff in the living. It has nothing to do with about being dead, but about the living, and that's why it's difficult to figure out what is actually happening.
You know, with near-death experiences, I've actually known a couple. I have a couple people that I've known that have been out. Well, I don't know if you want to say they passed away, but they were no longer breathing. One of them, a doctor here in Salt Lake City, went into cardiac arrest. They revived him after 22 minutes. And I had the opportunity, and he was a surgeon actually. And I was kind of cautious when I approached him, and I said, Tom, when you passed away, was there the bright light at the end of the tunnel? You know, this, that, and the other thing. And he said, there was nothing. He said, I don't remember a thing. He said, it was just. He said, everybody had to tell me about what happened. He said, I just remember passing out and coming, waking up in ICU. Nothing at all. Not a thing. Not a thing. Another person, claims that there was something there. There was some sort of a light being there. There was something there that they felt they communicated with.
Right.
And then, you've got to throw some more scientific, the test, the conditions of the test, when you're when you're in intensive care on that table and they're injecting everything imaginable in your body to bring you back. Does some of that affect your mind? It's almost like being drunk or consuming alcohol or a drug. Is the mind still alert but yet the introduction of a medicine or the introduction of a chemical, is it the chemical just like being drunk? Is it making you hallucinate a little bit too?
Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about near-death experience, which makes it keeps it in the realm of very strange, is that the experiences as reported when they occur, when somebody remembers something, they tend to be extremely clear. It's a very sharp memory. It's very unlike partial amnesia or vague memories or drunk. They're very, very clear, and the memory sustains basically for the rest of the person's life. Very clearly, and it's the same memory. It's been tested to see whether the story that someone describes when they are revived is the same 20 years later, and it is. It's exactly the same, very vivid story, and that's peculiar. So that either means that the experience that they had is really a strange paranormal something, or there are aspects of brain function that we simply don't understand at all.
Right.
So that's. I mean, I don't want to give the impression that near-death experiences are not mysterious, because there are many mysterious things about them, and this then is one of those things that sometimes people have these very vivid memories that they can remember. It changes their life. They're instantly transformed by it, which is another mystery of how that can happen, and it persists. So we don't really know yet exactly what's going on there, but it's certainly worth more investigation.
Well, there's so many different cases. A comment I've made several times when I've had different people from the medical community on the program talking about different things. One thing that I've maybe a little off topic, but People that have mental issues, whether that is maybe they're bipolar, maybe they're schizophrenic, they have some sort of mental condition. I sometimes wonder, Dean, if maybe there could be a mental condition there, but maybe there is some of this psychic ability, if you will. I don't know how to define it exactly, but some people that I feel have been diagnosed as I don't want to say being crazy, but right away when somebody is a little bit out of the norm, when they test them mentally with different tests, if everything doesn't line up right away, you get so many doctors, especially in this state. You walk into your doctor and say, "Hey, I'm a little bit depressed." Boy, he's writing you a prescription for something that you probably shouldn't be taking. But I often wonder, and I don't know if you've studied that or looked into that, people that are deemed to have some sort of mental problem, mental issue, that if that could truly in fact be some sort of a psychic gift, if you will, or intuition or whatever, and it's just being masked is a problem, is a mental problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a number of friends who are psychiatrists who are interested in psychic phenomena, and they all pretty much agree that some forms of schizophrenia are probably uncontrolled psychics. And if you think about it for a minute, if you could take a magic pill and suddenly become flagrantly clairvoyant, you would find it difficult after a while to tell the difference between your thoughts and other people's thoughts, or maybe your feelings and other people's feelings. It would drive you crazy very quickly, because you'd be buffeted constantly by other people's problems, and your sense of self and your ego start to dissolve. It would not be fun at all.
Right.
So the problem is that in order to test this idea, you'd need to get permission to study schizophrenics for this particular skill, say, and that's not so easy. Right. The first responsibility of a psychiatrist is to get somebody stable so they're able to function. In fact, the most common email that I receive is from somebody who says they're being disturbed by something. They have uncontrollable thoughts. They're picking up other people's feelings, or they're injecting thoughts in other people. They want it to stop. And so it might be psychic, but you don't play with it at that point. You simply want to get them stable. So if it requires medication, then that's what they require. There's a small percentage of people having those experiences that are maybe going through what's called a spiritual emergency. And this comes out of many esoteric traditions where if you're meditating, for example, and you're doing extensive meditation over a period of time, it can precipitate experiences that seem like schizophrenia. Uncontrollable rushes of energy in you, and you start being able to see things at a distance and precognition, the whole thing. And that's not being schizophrenic. It's actually transforming your normal awareness in ways that seem like it's crazy, and it can drive people kind of nutty. And so for people who are trained, for therapists or psychiatrists who are trained to make the difference, to discriminate between somebody who's really having a biochemical problem versus somebody having a spiritual emergency, the people going through the spiritual process probably do not need drugs. What they need is a protected place for maybe a month or two in order to work through what's happening to them. And I've known a number of cases where people were having these very strange experiences, and they were lucky enough to find therapists who were able to give them a safe place to be. A couple months later, they were perfectly normal.
Right.
Because they worked through whatever was going on. That generally does not happen if somebody has a true schizophrenia and has a biochemical problem.
Well, and sadly, there are. It would be great to find someone who would work with people, because I actually had a schizophrenic person in my family, in my life, and not harmful to anybody in any way, or even herself in any way. But they just pumped her with enough drugs that it actually changed her personality, everything. It just dumbed her way down,
right.
Which was sad, because They didn't have the opportunity to really study the problem. It was just, here, take the pill. Here's the prescription. This will stop the crazy talk. Well, yeah, of course, when you're tired and you can't stay awake past 7 o'clock at night, you're always walking around in a haze. You really don't feel like talking about too much. And that's,
right.
and unfortunately, that's in our society. That happens so much.
Well, it's standard practice. A doctor can lose their license if they're not following standard practice.
Right.
And so, fortunately, there is, in the few cases where somebody thinks they're having some sort of a spiritual problem, there's something called the Spiritual Emergence Network. And these are counselors who do understand that sometimes people have these strange experiences, and they can detect pretty quickly whether somebody needs medical help or whether they need something else. And they have a website, actually. It's spiritualemergence.info. And I know the director of this program. It's been around for quite a while now. And they can be useful in cases like this to make, not exactly a diagnosis, but they're trained and have experience in these kinds of things and may be helpful in some cases.
Some people, Dean, when they go through these episodes, do some of them think they're just having a total mental collapse or a mental breakdown? Oh,
yeah. Yeah, no, it's very scary because they begin to lose their sense of self and it's all falling apart. So oftentimes they'll get delusions of grandeur and they may become very paranoid and, the whole range of things that are very scary for the individual.
Yeah, I can say that in my life I've never, I hope not. I hope I've never had a mental breakdown, but people that I've talked to said that when you see somebody, the old term losing their mind, it's got to be a horrific thing, especially when they have no control over it, and in the fear, the inward fear of an individual. I think that's just got to be a horrific thing to experience.
Right. And this, by the way, is one of the reasons why the general public and scientists are both attracted and repelled about psychic phenomena, because there's a certain fear component associated with it. That's why it shows up in horror films so often. It's a destabilizing idea that maybe things are more connected than we think, and maybe the world is not quite as stable as it looks. And as soon as you open that doorway, it could be very frightening. And that's why I'm often asked, why don't I write a book or give a workshop on training people how to become more psychic? And I don't do that. I've decided, actually, evolution has shaped our brains and our minds in such a way as to maintain an image of very high stability in the world. You think about this, that if you go into a destabilized frame of mind and you become more psychic, you may not be able to tell the difference between a tiger sitting 2 feet in front of you versus a tiger 1,000 miles away.
Right.
And so over millennia, evolution has shaped us into a state of awareness that is really good at focusing on here and now.
Right.
And psychic phenomena has nothing to do with here and now. It's all about there and then. And that's why I think that maintaining a sense of stability is important for people, and I don't want to train them to get into a state where they start thinking about everything other than here and now.